Hello and welcome to IT Security Labs. This is our 14th video in our Game of Active Directory series, where we are learning Active Directory skills where you can practice hands-on in your own safe lab environment. So if you want to follow along, learn cybersecurity, ethical hacking skills, this is definitely a series for you where you can follow along in your own lab environment that you can set up. Today we're going to be talking about GenericAll Over a Container as part of an Active Directory attack. Previously, we enumerated and were able to gain access to a SQL server in an environment. We got command and control over that SQL server, and we were able to also run Bloodhound. In our Bloodhound, we found out that we have GenericAll on a container from the SQL machine. So here's where we are. So if we go back to our Kali, sign in with Kali. This is our setup, by the way. We have our Bloodhound there, where we should be able to see that our SQL machine has GenericAll over the computers OU. And that computers OU contains a web server. And this web server has a user who is signed in, who has a session on it, who is also part of the domain administrators. So that's our attack. We can control the computers OU by this GenericAll. Then by default, we should be able to now control the web machine. And if we can get on that web machine, we can steal the credentials for a user who is signed in, who is also a domain admin, and we own the entire domain. That's pretty much our attack here. And as always, as we attack, we want to see, can we actually generate alerts in our environment? In this case, we have Elastic Security showing us whether or not we are emitting a lot of alerts, and also if we are actually just being careless. So without wasting time, let's jump in. With this in your Bloodhound, when you have GenericAll over a computer or any other container, what steps can you do to make sure that you actually have control over that container? How can you make sure that you have inheritance so that you can modify objects that are inside of the container? Scenarios where this happens might be a computer's OU. And if it's a computer's OU, like in our case, we want to be able to steal the token for the administrator for that machine that is inside of that computer's OU. So we need to have inheritance. If this was a user's OU, we want to be able to modify the users that are inside of that user's OU so that maybe we can reset the password, or maybe we can add users. If this was a group, maybe we want to be able to add ourselves to that group. Either way, it doesn't matter. When you have GenericAll over a container in Active Directory, in this case, you actually can enable inheritance so that you can also control the objects inside of it. And that's the main objective for our video today. All right, so first, now that we know that we have GenericAll on SQL, the first thing that we're going to do is make sure that we confirm that we can actually control that object. For this series, I have a companion GitHub repo where you can go and find these commands as well. So these notes will be posted to my GitHub repository where you can actually just find a lot of these write-ups and you can copy paste as well. I'll explain every command here as we run it, but we'll be using Impacket. I highly encourage you to have a virtual environment for Impacket so that you can run Impacket correctly. I'm already in an Impacket virtual environment here. As you can see, Impacket env, just set it up, or you can run Impacket directly on Kali. This is not part of this video, but if you want me to do that, let me know in the comments and I will show you a video on how to set up a virtual environment for Impacket. This makes sure that your Impacket is stable and that your scripts are running correctly. Without a virtual environment, your Kali might have a different version of Python and you might run into all kinds of errors. So first, we need to verify that we actually have read and or full control over the container in AD. For that, we are running dacledit.py and we want to read the permissions for our principal SQL $, which is the machine that we compromise. And we want to see what permissions do we have on the computer's object in the Academy Ninja .lan domain. That's what this part here means. and we need to specify the user that we're authenticating with. In this case, we're authenticating with the SQL user. We're authenticating using the AES key that we dumped when we dumped credentials in the last video. If you remember from credential dumping here, we actually dumped the credentials, so you can read about it, and we found it right here when we found the machine accounts. So with this, we're saying, let's just go and check to see if we actually have any permissions. We expect to see that we have generic all and we have full control over the computer object. First, in order for us to check this, we can go by and get a Kerberos ticket. This is going to be a ticket that we can use our AES AES key and get a ticket for our machine account. Remember, this is not a person's account. Machines can authenticate in Active Directory, and that's what we are doing here. So as you can see, I'm in my Impacket here. I don't have a Kerberos ticket. In Windows, you can actually use tickets to authenticate, and machines can authenticate. Now I have a SQL cache file. When we run subsequent commands, it will try to use this cache file, or we can use our AES key. Either way, it doesn't matter. We prefer to use a ticket if possible. As you can see, we got it. We use getst.py, and we said, hey, we have an AES key here, which is similar to a password, and we have a SQL account. We have to specify the domain / then the SQL account. Machine accounts always end with a $. And we went through to the domain controller and say, hey, can you give us a Kerberos ticket? This ticket is valid for a certain amount of time, depending on the environment, and this ticket can be passed around to authenticate in AD. So now we have a ticket local here. We can import this and use it if we wanted to, but I'm also going to just pass the AES key. The dacledit.py command checks for that ticket by default. That's another important thing. I'll show you with the syntax to pass the AES key as well to authenticate, but just know that these commands with Impacket, sometimes, not all of them, would check for that key. So we're saying, hey, Python, use dacledit.py, check if our principal SQL has any permission. So read in the computers OU in the academy.ninja.lan environment, if our principal SQL machine has any permissions, authenticate using our AES key and authenticate towards this DC here. And like I said, this will also check if we have the cache file anyway, if it was imported. So if I run this, it's going to say, oh yeah, that user that you have, we do have full control and on the computers object that you wanted. We do have full control. Remember, having full control over an object does not necessarily mean that you have control over the children, the child objects inside of that container. So in order for us to control the machine account, in this case, the web machine that is inside of this computers OU, we need to enable inheritance. How do we enable inheritance? We need to go back and say, hey, I would like you to perform an action for me. Write some writes for me to be full control for the principal SQL on the target to our computers OU in the academy ninja.lan. Make sure that it is in inheritance and authenticate using our AES key to using the domain controller. That's pretty much what this command is doing. And we'll come back here and we'll say, okay, let's see if we will fix that. All right, so it says objects with an admin count 1 will no inherit access control ACEs from their parent content OU. DACL backed up. Okay, so we have a backup just in case something happens, but we modified it successfully. So let's check to see if we now have inheritance here. And you need to do this whether it's computers OU or any other group that you have generic or on before you start manipulating objects inside of it. So let's go back and say action read again. We're checking our permissions. Last time, remember, we just had access allowed and full control. Let's see what comes up this time. All right, as you can see, this is what it was last time, a very small piece. Now we have container inheritance object the permissions. So we have successfully manipulated our permissions for our computer. In this case, our SQL machine now has full control of the computer's OU and the child objects. Next, in the next video, we'll go and say, okay, now that we have full control, including on web, we're going to mint an administrator's ticket from the web machine so that we can just use that ticket to sign into the machine. That's the next video that we're going to do. In this video, I showed you how we have control over an organizational unit and we enabled inheritance to include the children inside of that OU. Thank you for watching and I hope you learned something here. And as always, I hope to see you next time.